Lies of P is a really interesting Souls-like game, based loosely around the story of Pinocchio and set in the Belle Epoch, or at least a dystopian steampunk apocalypse version of the Belle Epoch in Paris. Now, as I record, I apologize if there's any rumbles of thunder or lashing of rain in the background. At the moment, I'm recording in the middle of a thunderstorm, which is almost fitting, since the game opens on a storm as well. So grab your raincoat, watch out for puppets, and get ready for First Impressions, a series where I dive into a game, and after playing through the demo, or experiencing the first couple hours, I give my thoughts. Now when it comes to Lies of P, the game has some problems, but there's also a ton of potential here. Because right off the start, the game does an amazing job of immersing you, which is why I want to lead with a few snippets from the opening and one of the cutscenes that you discover about an hour into the game.
Geppetto's puppet. We need your help. I'm so happy to see you.
Now, if we're just talking the mechanics of gameplay, I think it's pretty similar to Bloodborne, or maybe Sekiro. But if we look at the world, the graphics, and the atmosphere, I'd think Dishonored or maybe even Bioshock. It could just be that I'm a sucker for steampunk games, but I was drawn in immediately. The rain on the ground, the scattered corpses of the citizens, and the creepy red eyes of the puppets. There was something about it that just clicked for me. And I also noticed a lot of small touches right off the bat. Like how slow and clunky the puppets' attacks are, reflecting their mechanical joints. How the haunting blue lights show up easily, even at a distance, not only giving you a good idea of where loot is, but also, especially when combined with the butterfly motif, it adds a surreal, almost ethereal penumbra to the world. I also very quickly noticed that aggression is rewarded a lot versus basic enemies, because you can just go in hard and stunlock them. As long as they run out of health before you run out of stamina, you're fine. Like most Souls-likes, you can block and dodge. Early on, I was trying to dodge. When I played Dark Souls 3, I was a dex build, so dodging around felt pretty natural to me. And it worked really well on the first mini-boss, but then I got punished hard when I tried it on the first full boss. As it turns out, this game you're supposed to be blocking and parrying far more than you're supposed to be dodging. Or maybe the dodge just sucks, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Something else I picked up on is the way the game uses sound cues. They help to clue you in when certain events happen. Things like staggering an enemy, filling your fate bar, or I think getting low on stamina as well. Though I don't actually 100% remember if there was a sound for that, or I just noticed it from the fact that my character stopped attacking. Speaking of, you start off with a really basic weapon and get to pick up more along the way, pretty much sticking one-to-one with the Dark Souls formula, something the game does a lot. Each weapon has its own special, but where the game departs from Dark Souls is the weapon's actually two parts, the blade and the hilt. The hilt also has its own special, and later on you get to mix and match them, which is pretty cool. Another form of character customization, which you get early on and I expect opens up as you continue to play, is the Legion arm. One of your arms is that of a normal boy puppet, and the other is a mechanical weapon ready to destroy anything in its path. Use it to smash through foes, or grapple them, pulling them in and allowing you to deal massive damage or initiate a stunlock combo. There's even a backstab, although unfortunately it was really hard to pull off. A lot of the time I'd sneak up behind the enemy, Stevie icon, bash them, and it would just be a normal light attack. So hopefully this is improved for the release version of the game, but overall, this part doesn't feel bad. What does feel bad is dodging, to the point where dodging was always the inferior option. If you're not good at parrying, you're gonna have a bad time with the game. Sometimes the dodge just didn't want to go off. It felt like there was a weird delay on my inputs. Sometimes after dodging, I'd randomly dodge a second time. I'm not sure if this is a controller issue, a game issue, or a me issue. It happened infrequently enough that I wasn't able to really reliably replicate it, and just frequently enough that I was able to be annoyed by it. Plus, it's very hard to tell both attack timings and ranges for a lot of enemies. You go to dodge, and you get stuck on their model, and you're still in front of them, your iframes are over, you get hit. Overall, dodging was a bad time. Now, luckily, you're able to regenerate some of the health lost when blocking by being aggressive and just bashing enemies, which of course makes block the superior option. And beyond that, if you perfect block, you take no damage, plus have a chance to build up a bunch of power, stagger an enemy, and absolutely annihilate them. So I began to move my way through the city, encountering the various deranged puppets, some of which tried to attack me with melee, others tried to shoot me, and some were just plain insane. Again, I like the way the world immerses you. There were little tutorials here and there telling you, oh hey, you can unlock doors. But overall, I still felt really incentivized to explore and just experience it for what it was, without thinking about my objectives over there, so I need to follow the arrow on the map. Because they copied one thing from Dark Souls, which has been highly successful, of not including a map and not putting arrows on it. Very often, open world games aren't. They're linear. Yet, despite Lies of P being a linear game, it felt far more open to me because the game left me up to my own devices when it came to exploration. Yes, there was technically only one way forward, but I didn't have to go the right way first. I could go down a side alley, fight 5 enemies, stop, heal up, fight them again, maybe take a wrong turn, get lost, and repeat that process until I did eventually reach the hotel, where I had to get in. And here's where the game's other interesting mechanic comes in. One of the rules of puppets is puppets can't lie, but you are playing as Geppetto's puppet, Pinocchio, who, much like a human boy, can lie. And I expect there's going to be something as the game progresses where the more you lie, the more something happens, and the less you lie, something else happens. In the case of entering the hotel, this is the introduction to that mechanic, so you don't really get a choice, you have to lie. Though if a load screen of lie or die is anything to go off of, maybe you're going to be lying quite a lot. Upon reaching the hotel, I met Sophia, the mysterious woman who had been talking to me the entire time. She didn't quite hand me a sword and tell me I was the King of England, but it was still nice to put a face to a voice in my head. Then I looked around the hotel, and noticed the voice acting is quite nice. Again, not something I was really expecting. Usually voice acting in a game, especially a demo, is just okay, but here it was really well done. After looking around more, I found out the progression and crafting systems are straight out of Dark Souls, like many other systems in the game, which in most cases is a good thing. It builds familiarity, but it might also make the game feel uninspired or repetitive to people who have played a ton of Souls-likes. After that, I got my new mission to go find Geppetto, so I began exploring and encountered some new enemy types. Ranged foes, melee foes, really annoying foes with what looks like some sort of feather duster made out of spikes, and I got a new weapon, an electric bashy mace that felt great, until I encountered this guy. He sucked, and absolutely ruined my day. I just wasn't quite able to predict when he would do his multi-hit swing versus when he'd do his single-hit swing. And so I was trying to use my strategy that had worked on the previous boss of block, light attack, block, light attack, block, light attack, 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 special, etc. This didn't work at all. Instead, I found the pattern relied much more on keeping my distance, dodging, and weaving in hits when I could, which was interesting and gives me hope that the entire game isn't actually about blocking, and it depends on the enemy you face. Could also be that I just needed to get good, because after a few attempts I took him down surprisingly without issue on an attempt where I thought I was just going to fail. This was also when I noticed the space used by the game's demo is really efficient. When you're exploring an area and clearing enemies, you often go up a ladder, through a door, or to another part of the zone. Then you find a key that lets you loop back. This means you can minimize the time running back to your souls if you happen to die, while also making a relatively small area feel surprisingly big and immersive. Something else interesting is, while certain foes would take pot shots at you from rooftops, not only alerting you to their presence, but also being fairly annoying in the process. Oh, there's also this guy just hanging off a ledge for some reason. Yeah, he was, I guess, just waiting to ruin someone's day. Luckily, I ruined his instead. But this also makes the world feel more real to me, where I'm interacting with something, a city that actually existed, rather than just a straight linear experience, despite it being a straight linear experience. I also stuck to the tried and true Dark Souls method of just running past enemies to hop into a boss fight if I needed to do it over and over again. Oh, and there aren't crystal lizards, there are instead haunting red butterflies that you still get to murder. And honestly, the crystal lizards in Dark Souls are kind of cute, so I'm much happier to murder a weird spooky red butterfly. Though I'm not sure if Sophia would agree. Now in terms of a full game, One thing I'm curious about is builds. All the weapons that I tried were largely the same, though when I restarted and made a completely different save file with a two-handed weapon, it handled quite differently. The specials were also kind of often the same, where most of them were just a variant of do damage. But being able to swap the handles and weapons, plus being able to kind of create your custom weapon at the end game, could lead to more diversity than I experienced just within the game's first couple levels. And one other criticism that I had, which started as a small criticism and got much larger as I faced the game's final boss, is it's really hard to tell the timing on enemies. It feels like a lot of enemies stand there holding their attacks for way too long just to bait out your parry. Now at first, I thought this was so you could punish them within the window, interrupting the attack. But no, it's just to mess with you. This feels very heavy-handed and lazy on the part of the devs, and was honestly pretty jarring to me when everything else was so smooth and streamlined. Now I know you do have a way to punish enemies during this. If you know they're going to hold their attack for, let's say, 2 seconds, and your light attack's 1 second, you can light attack block. But it still felt really weird that someone was just standing there holding their sword, and I couldn't stop them from hitting me with it. When, in real life, I'd just hit them in the face, and that would be the end of it. I mean, okay. I guess there's nothing about real life involved here, since I'm a living immortal mechanical puppet fighting deranged mortal mechanical puppets, but you know what? I'm gonna go with it anyway. And last but not least, the other system which I'm a little unsure on is weapon durability. As you fight enemies, your weapon's durability decreases. Now, you have a grindstone with infinite uses to sharpen it back up. However, this can be tricky to pull off mid-combat, especially when also weaving in heals and dealing with limited resources such as consumables. It could actually be a really good system that I just didn't get a good feel for from the demo, or it could be a system that ultimately is more annoying and doesn't add anything to the gameplay except for a chance to make a mistake. So overall, I was very impressed with the demo for Lies of P or Lies of Pinocchio. Gameplay-wise, it reminds me quite a bit of Sekiro, where parrying and perfect parries are important. I also feel like this forces you to get good faster without relying on cover, such as cowering behind a beefy shield, though it could also push people away from the game, and ultimately mean that, much like Sekiro, this is a controversial, less popular Souls-like. I also felt like overall, the demo was extremely polished. Yes, there were some minor graphical glitches, but enemy movements, animation, sound design, and atmosphere, even especially level design, were impeccable most of the time. And thematically, the bosses were great as well. The first boss had fairly easy to learn patterns, pushing you to use parry, manage your stamina, and get through the fight. The second mini-boss? Also not too bad. It was really only the last one where things fell apart, and I don't know if this is a sign of more to come, or just the sign of a boss that wasn't as well balanced as everything else. So overall, I'm genuinely impressed with the demo. It felt nearly AAA level, thematically it's super cool, and it immersed me immediately. So I'd give this a glowing recommendation to wishlist. I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on the game in the future, but I don't know if I'm going to be playing it. I have some concerns based on the end boss of the demo. And also, I don't know if I'm good enough at perfect parries to actually make it through a game like this if it ends up being a difficulty similar to Sekiro. Though the two-handed weapon did seem to have much higher block efficiency, where I was barely taking damage when blocking. It could also be that I'll just take a two-handed weapon, learn to time my blocks well, stack some stamina, and end up having a really good time like I did with Dark Souls 3. And so, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on Lies of P? And because I'm looking for more game recommendations, what are some of your favorite immersive games? Be sure to let me know down in the comments below. Oh, and if you have any thoughts on this slightly more conversational style of first impressions, also let me know if that's better or worse as well. And with that said, a special thanks to my patrons and channel members for their continued support. For as low as $1 a month, you can help me spend my time trying a bunch of indie game demos and sharing my thoughts. Speaking of, if you want to know my thoughts on either Hammerwatch 2 or Moonstone Island, 2 completely different games, those will be up in the card and down in the description below for you to check out. Or you can always go for a recommendation that's on screen right now. That said, thanks for watching, and remember, puppets can't lie, so everything I said must be the truth.